So for the first episode of Optimise, it's just going to be you and I, and we're going to explain a little bit about our stories, our backgrounds, and why we've decided to co-host this podcast that is committed to helping provide value to people in everything that relates to optimization of the physical, the mental, the social, and the spiritual aspects of life. As well as, I'm sure we'll get into some random stuff throughout the time. I'm sure we'll get into finance, economics, business, anything that can optimize another human's life in any way. Yeah.
That's it. It's just good to start putting this information out there, because something that was a big obstacle for me was that I always thought it had to be perfect. It doesn't. It's going to help people regardless if they can find it. It's going to help athletes. It's going to help mainstream people just trying to get their lives together. So it's good to finally step in and get chatting.
True, man. Yeah. I've been quite a perfectionist throughout my life, and it doesn't help. It's so much better to get things moving, take action, and keep iterating. You're going to learn so much more and be able to apply what you've learned.
And it's unrealistic to expect that everything's going to be perfect, because especially when we look at when we start, nothing's perfect. We're figuring it out. We're on a process of discovery, and it's just allowing those mistakes to happen and to learn from them. So I think that gamified principle is really important as well. It's it's okay to fail. It's okay to try things and then reset, recalibrate, and try again.
Which is it's kind of the philosophy we've entered this podcast with. We're like, look, let's just start. Let's get moving. Hormozy said only 1% of podcasts make it to over 20 episodes, so let's just get moving.
I feel like once we hit 21, we're looking pretty deep down the line now, but it won't take us too long, but that'll be a pretty cool milestone to tick off.
We said we actually wanted to complete that by the end of the year, so if we're only on 5 and it's December 31st,
we're hustling.
We're going to be pumping out a few 3-minute episodes.
Yeah, it's the perfect time of year anyway. Save it for all the people jumping on with their New Year's resolutions.
Yeah, straight. Okay, so our plan, Steve. First, we're going to introduce ourselves. I'm going to go through 10-15 minutes, give everyone a little introduction to who I am and why I'm really excited about doing this podcast with Steve. So, where to start? I've got a couple of notes that will help me.
Yeah.
My name is Fraser Beck. I grew up in Invercargill, Southland. It's in the south of the South Island in Aotearoa, New Zealand. And I've been committed to holistic health and well-being and learning everything in relation to the 4 main dimensions of health for at least 15 years. Those 4 dimensions being physical health, mental, social, and spiritual, which are the 4 dimensions that get taught throughout our high school physical education curricula in New Zealand. And I've always been fascinated by breathing and how breathing relates to these 4 main dimensions, which again is an indigenous form of wisdom that has been entrained and taught to a lot of kids that have grown up in New Zealand. So I'm really excited to share some of the research that I'm a part of, and man, we're going to get some cool guests on the show, no doubt. I think the reason why I wanted to do this with Steve is, bro, because you've got a similar drive and a similar contagious motivation. And I sense anytime we've had a conversation, going back to the first time I met you, outside a hot yoga class, we'd just done a Bikram yoga class, or 26 and 2 as it's now known, which is it's 90 minutes of hell.
Yep.
Extremely deep stretching, holding the position of strength at the end range and breathing in 40 degrees and 40% humidity.
Mm-hmm.
And both having our athletic endeavors, we were tapping into yoga, and then we were kind of destroyed out back after flooding our bodies with water and we had a conversation revolving around Jiu-Jitsu, and you're actually the reason that I started getting into jits and taking martial arts a little bit more seriously.
And vice versa, you're the reason I got into ability.
True.
Yeah, I mean, it's hot yoga, right? We're all in the same room, and honestly, 90% of that room's female. And I've always thought that, well, my preconceived notion was that they had an easier path to flexibility. And to see you folding in half, defined, big muscles, great development, and being able to get into positions that were impossible for me, I was like, that I need this. I need to enter this sort of this chapter.
Yeah, man.
Good cover there.
And what about yourself, bro? What's your background? Where'd you grow up and things?
So grew up South Auckland, moved to Dunedin when I was about 12, floated around a bit, lots of movement, my life, and played rugby a lot since I was like 6, and I think I basically played that all the way through to like 22, then moved to league.
League.
Yeah, that was a much better time in my opinion, but you can't say that in New Zealand, you'll get demonized, but yeah, better sport. So developed a lot of I think it's still good exercise and good physicality of what you get out of it, but you get pretty jacked up from the impact.
Yeah.
And especially we're playing in South Auckland. I remember one year I made the open grade. I was like a kilo over the weight, and I was playing against like 9-year-olds that had beards, and it was it was a horrible time. So I just got smashed. And I often just bring this up when I'm talking to people. I didn't win a game of rugby for about 5 years straight.
Damn.
I never experienced winning because we were in a very small team. It wasn't too fun. But yeah, that sort of left me with a pretty jacked up body. I had lots of injuries. Like I think 15 broken bones.
And what bones? What were the main injuries?
The worst one was a head knock. We can talk about that later, so I can touch a bit of thing, like vital lobe. Injuries were broken half, multiple breaks on both ankles, wrist, my arm, my collarbone, my ribs. We went through the ringer with sort of recovery and rehab, and that's sort of touching base on when I started weight so early.
Yeah.
I was 15. So, time I was moving to running, that became my thing. So I ran every day from 2005, every single day, until about 2009 when I started to taper it back.
And this was for a form of rehabilitation you got into running?
No, this was coping with life and trying to lose fat and that runner's high that everyone sort of came for. It didn't do anything good for my body. It just jacked up my legs.
It's like if you've already got imbalances and injuries, you're kind of compounding on top of those imbalances when you push the body hard.
Yeah, and you have to experience that. I feel like running's a very easy entry level for getting your journey underway. Same as lifting weights, but you can very, very quickly become obsessed with just one pathway to exercise. And that was me. I ran distance, but then I got scouted by athletics. And that got better. That taught me some technique. The coach, Caledonian, was like, you're like the bumblebee. You shouldn't be able to fly, but you can. Your technique's trash. Your flexors are so tight. Your elbows don't line up. You're running.
Biomechanically, this doesn't make sense, but you're jumping further than most.
Yeah, and that was just by the baseline. There was no technique. It was hard work and baseline. So that was the entry to why I suck at moving.
Yeah, and
also like how you can fix it, because I basically peaked at 19, 20 years old with hard work, and you can't get any more out of where you're going unless you change the way you train, right? Definition of insanity. So I had to change some stuff.
And when did Jiu-Jitsu enter your world?
2014, I started properly. 2007, I officially tried my first class. And
7 years prior.
Yep. Knew it was great for me, learned a little bit, did a couple of weeks, and then beat up my friends that didn't know anything. And again, running took over my life from 2005 to 2009. So jiu-jitsu didn't have a place.
Yeah.
But when I had a head knock in rugby league, I had to find another outlet, a gentle art, if you will. And that was when I took jiu-jitsu to like a more of a hobby. And by 2018, I was training twice a day. I had basically dedicated for the next 4 years to try to get as good as I could at this sport. So it was a very hard sport to enter with such a tight body. People talk about, I mean, you'll know this through pretty much every breath modality you've done, is that if you don't breathe well, you don't move well. I was holding on to so much tension. I was squeezing things for dear life. My hips weren't working. But because I was so fit, it didn't matter. I was able to still get things.
Yeah.
But the movement was poor.
Now, remind me, were you a 400-meter runner?
800, yeah.
800 was your event?
Yeah, 2.4K I was pretty good at. I got under 7 minutes at 2.4Ks. I got a lot of 703s, 715s, but when I cracked 650, when I cracked 7, I got 653 once, and I never did it again. I was like, I'm done running this track. I'm done doing the laps, but 800 was good. I was under 2 minutes for that, so pretty quick.
What, under 2 minutes per lap for the 800?
Under 2 minutes for an 800. So 2 laps.
Damn, that's fast. Because I remember I was always pushing to try and get a sub-minute 400. And like,
yes, yeah.
could do it at sports day. Got a lot harder after leaving high school. And like trying to do it now, I did it 3 or 4 months ago, and I was getting like 111, 109. I was like, man, what's going on? It obviously helps to have your high school friends beside you running. You know, it gives you the drive.
Yeah. You're not chasing those guys down.
Yeah. That's a good review of like your path down athletics and your motivations around jiu-jitsu. I'd love to hear how it relates to your motivations to do this podcast and why we've embarked on this.
Yeah. Again, it's very similar to you, and I'd like to hear after this talking about how you discovered that breath for your spine from such an early age as an early mover. But I wish I had this available to me when I was trying to excel in running, trying to figure out how to get good at jiu-jitsu in New Zealand, in the South Island, when no one's holding your hand, there's no help coming. You have to discover it yourself. And the main limitation was my ability to move efficiently and get into position, or they seemed to be able to get great strength when they were in these positions. Because I always felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, like holding on for dear life, as soon as I got taken out of my comfort space. And that's because my end range strength was weak. I didn't have the lengthening tissue. I didn't have the activation in the position. And no one had ever taught me how we can achieve it. So I found yoga, and I stumbled that for years. And then stuff started to open up and where I go with it. And yeah, so.
And I guess now we want to share that with young up-and-coming. Yeah, it's not just athletes. Although we both started, very much in the physical dimension of health and well-being, it has evolved over time to be much more of a holistic approach and understanding, like the mind is the body is the mind, and in order to connect to the spirit, which is very hard to quantify and measure with science, we can't do that just yet. But it's all interconnected.
Exactly that. The beginners that you mentioned there, it's like that's been a really rewarding part. I trained my dad amongst other people with no experience. And they all come back eventually and say, I wish I knew how many ways there were to train. Like, I always thought it was the same stuff, the same routine, the same compounding effects over time. But you can just fast track your way to health if you know where to start and how to apply it.
Bro, that makes me think of Shoe Dog with Phil Knight and how, like, running wasn't a thing. In the 70s, running only just started to become like a cultural fad where people would run as a form of fitness. Like people would yell at the street, like, get back on your get back on your horse and cart, or you're back in your cart. It's just like, why are you running?
Yeah.
And now it's like such an embedded part of what it is to be human.
Yeah.
It's funny that your dad had a similar sense. It's like, oh, I didn't realize the different ways we can train. So many different pathways you can take of adaptation.
And breath's usually the hardest one to get people to experience and feel unless you've had a experience with a breath coach like yourself. Some people find it themselves, or some people research it themselves and learn a bit about it, but a lot of the time, people's entry level to how breath's a performance tool or a health enhancer is only through how can I lift more weight and hold my core in place
Tight.
to generate more force.
Yeah. And whether it's like, man, I'm trying to like resist my temptation to dive deep into the rabbit hole of breathing and the science, because like I know we're gonna have many an episode where I'm always gonna bring it back to breathing, and I can sense you're just like itching, like start talking about breathing, bro. I'm like, I'm trying to frame this podcast.
But that was your entry level. That was
Yeah.
how you fixed it.
Yeah, I guess I didn't really intro of like what made me find breathing. As you alluded to with the spine, I had this degenerative spinal disorder that was diagnosed by a physiotherapist in, I was 13 years old, so we're looking...
Tiano?
Yeah, I ended up going to Tiano for treatment, but first the chiropractor that I saw were in Invercargill, and I couldn't get out of back pain, you know? I was 13, 14 years old, and they keep kind of like sending me back to the physio. They sent me to the chiro, and they couldn't fix it. And then the chiropractor was very forward-thinking. She was like, you need to go see this specialist because he's on the level that, you know, of rehabilitation, understanding, and science that you need to go see. And within the space of 45 minutes, he got me to activate my diaphragm, breathe to my full capacity, and the pain was gone. Like, I had it for almost 10 months. And, you know, that was a pretty illuminating and eye-opening moment, even as a kid, 13 years old, walking out and saying to mum, like, yo, I feel different. There's something to do with that breathing thing. And ever since then, although I haven't been fully diving into the deep theory and research of breathing since I was 13, the seed had already been planted. So I think cultivating awareness of the breath and how that relates to these four main dimensions, that was a big part of my development, for sure.
Was your initial... were you still playing basketball at that age?
Yeah, so my older brother was a really good basketball player, and he kind of, at that age, he started to excel, and that's what made me get into it around that age. So he was about 16, 17, I was around 13, and that was the main sport. You know, when I found basketball, I kind of dropped rugby, especially when you go to university. You've got to choose what are you going to do. But basketball was the way. That was my, and it still is, to be honest. It's my sport of choice. I lived in Queenstown for the last 5 years, and man, I would love to still push to get a few NBL games before I get too old.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Because you were, I remember, like obviously the real movement, one that with the e-health. I remember in 2008, I actually saw you, I believe, dunking in unipole, effort, or at least flying through the air, and you said something about the feet at that point in time. That was like the reason that you were able to now do this was because of your feet, your health that you've developed through springing capacity.
Yeah. I
remember thinking...
I remember the day, and I remember the phase of life when there was like a solid 6 months of just being foot focused.
Yeah.
I had a
But early movers, like you're finding a good physio, right? So there's levels to physio, just like there's levels to coach. so many people have one experience with a bad coach, a bad fit, or a low level, and they don't fix the problem and they give up hope. Whereas when you go to someone who knows, truly understands how we can fix and how we can adapt, results happen. Finally, it registers with you and everything changes. Your trajectory of health goes another way. Your trajectory of life goes another way.
Yeah, man.
I find it that we both had a good physio. Mine was when I was 14, got me doing Nordics. Ahead of the time, 20 years ago.
Wow.
Yours was getting you doing advanced forms of breath practice, diaphragm, deep spine. Like, this stuff has still not been touched on enough with this.
Yeah, and to think, these therapists that gave us that information probably don't realize how much of a difference they made in the life of, a young boy at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And it's amazing to think that now with podcasts and mediums such as this, we can actually get information out. Hopefully, there's a young 14, 15-year-old kid who's going through something. They've got an injury, or they're, maybe it's anxiety, maybe it's something to do in their life that's not completely clicking. Hopefully we can provide a string to pull on intuitively that they can solve the problem. And I'm looking
and our 30-year-olds, 40-year-olds, because it doesn't matter when you find it, it will help. It will change everything if you can introduce it in a way that's consistent and dedicated around your practice with it.
I'm into that. And it does not take long. As soon as you get a taste of the momentum when it comes to your health, it compounds. And as long as you stay consistent, it's life changing.
I like to talk about beginner gains. It's a common understood thing. People go to the gym, they pack on all this muscle, and it's like, man, I wish I could keep this rate going all the way through my bodybuilding career or whatever it is that you're focused on. If you haven't trained plyometrics before, you get beginner gains. If you haven't done gymnastics, beginner gains, breathwork, etc., etc. It's about finding out what avenue you haven't trained in and where you're leaving money on the table. What's that 20%?
Yeah.
And then get your results and change basically your body, your mind, and social and everything. I feel like it's trickle-on effect.
Yeah.
When you move, you feel better. You just have better interactions, more positive experiences in your life.
Beginner gains, I think it's important to highlight that if we're starting at 30 or 40 and we've had a lifetime of potential injuries and another 20 or 30 years of a seated posture, working in an office job, beginner gains are going to be different compared to that 14, 15-year-old that has a body that is balanced and ready to excel. So it's like, I think it's so important for us to work together, you and I and our entire generation, to create a system for the developing youth of New Zealand first and then eventually the world to actually have these resources and have the system already set in place, so they're not going to get, they're not going to fall off the cliff. They're going to be caught and kind of nurtured, not only in the physical dimension, but mentally, socially, and spiritually as well.
And New Zealand particularly is bad for, first of all, the level of PE and health that we get at high school is quite low. And most of our athletes play netball, basketball, volleyball's kind of getting in there, but it's mainly rugby, rowing, and cricket. And the level of strength and conditioning around teenagers in those sports is very, very poor. And they're getting jacked up bodies, they're getting injured, and now they're sitting on the couch becoming fans of watching the sport because they can no longer play it. Time and time again that these are sports with whole life. We're still moving fantastically, strong as hell when we're 35. If we put the work in around, like you said, a structured system, you don't start too early, but you do have to start. The toll that we have to take.
Yeah, and compared to America, whose strength and conditioning protocols are quite far ahead in terms of that high school age group. That's it does reap dividends in the future. Possibly not for sport specificity, because New Zealand still kills it at rugby, and we haven't necessarily been in the S&C for more than a decade at that age group. But I completely see where you're coming from in terms of setting the foundation, the physical foundation to be able to excel later in life.
I think it's important to mention that a lot of rugby players aren't athletic or strong. They're good at rugby. It's like, I've got a pretty cool physio I work with now, and he's trained many of the rugby women in Otago, and their numbers are not where hers are, and their speed is not where hers is. You know, if you're outlifting front rowers and you're faster than fullbacks and wingers, and you're a retired MMA athlete, what does that say about the level of training that they're potentially getting or not getting, whether or not these testings were done when they were in a state of fatigue or whatever? You know, if you're going to be putting numbers up on a wall and reflecting on how much the team's able to perform, good. That's a measurable unit that we should be working towards. But they probably shouldn't be doing the structure the way they are. Maybe not heavy lifting on a Monday when you played on Saturday, you know what I mean? So it's starting to think a little bit more outside the box and not like, hey, this is the way we've always done it in England. Because a lot of those All Blacks from previous generations are just farmers of hard work and resilience. And we can get more out of our athletes.
It's different now, isn't it? Like, now that there's high performance sport and organizations committed to developing people's baseline strength and speed. But when you said that about someone being athletic and strong but not necessarily being or like someone being good at rugby but not necessarily being strong or fast, it often works in opposites. Like, the best athletes aren't the best in the gym, and the best lifters or the strongest people in the gym aren't the best athletes. It's like, so often people are sacrificing technique and the right activation patterns in order to lift that heavy weight. And then when they get on the field and they're required to run fast and have a smooth gait, they're so rigid from squatting slow and heavy. So often it's like, you're not athletic anymore. So getting pretty focused still on like why we're doing anything when it comes to S&C in the physical dimension of health, it's very important. Having a plan and knowing why we're doing something is vital.
Yeah, a lot of the time they're saying like train like a tractor, move like a Ferrari. This is sort of what a lot of team sports have honed in. Is they're trying to find like what's the bare minimum that we can do to get the most out of our sport, because you know it is team sports. A lot of the time, people can carry the load for the team. There's always an athlete running more than someone else on the field or doing more.
Yeah.
But when and we come back to this sort of like, how should we enter as baseline level athletes? What are the standards that we should be achieving? Movement for health. If you had a team of athletes, they would be able to beat their other team the majority of the time on repeat, because not everyone has the same ability to move well, perform well, breathe well, recover, and then compound their effects over and over again. What we're seeing is a team that can perform well, and then they get injured. There's someone that's out for 9 months. There's another bro moving in. They're out. Another one. The turnover rate of broken bodies is ridiculous. Whereas what we want is we want consistent seasons, compounding effect, winning and winning and winning, and people not getting broken. But because we don't have that baseline foundational movement, foundational strength, foundational understanding, there's a time limit.
And man, you and I imagine you can vouch for the same experience. I wanted to succeed so badly in my sports. I would train very hard for far too long. You know, for 2 hours.
More.
It's like just I'd love it, and I'd have music pumping, and I'd be in the zone. And then, like, this is going back to when I was kind of 15, 16, 17, really starting to hunt it.
Yeah, great time.
I wouldn't have been that aware of how badly my body was broken down in that session. I would lift heavy the next day. And I'd do it again, and then, like, it's all right when you're that age, but then when you start doing it in your mid to late 20s, especially now that I'm 30, you realize how much of an effect a heavy training load, whether it's, you know, cardiovascular or resistance training, whatever you're doing, it breaks the body down. And you need the time to recover. It is so important.
And it's like move on to that. It's not what you do in training, recover from, and that's going to be your fuel for the next session. Is how you were feeling after the session prior, and if you haven't given yourself adequate sleep, nutrition, recovery time, and again coming back to jiu-jitsu, we finish training in the evening, and then we're up in the morning. Potentially, probably not the best idea. We need to be nailing sleep and recovery. Otherwise, just adding our progress, getting injured more.
Yeah,
there's lots of different ways we can go with it. I feel like when we touch base on recovery as a separate episode, that's going to be a true value for any athlete what you're playing, because we've got hacks. We've experienced trying to do sports, my sport particularly. Everyone's on. Yeah, like being an athlete, 30s.
Yeah, having that
hard work,
that foresight to be able to look forward into the future and know, like, oh, I'm going to train again in 2 or 3 days. Am I going to be able to recover in time? And having that mindset when it comes to developing the physical traits necessary in your sport. You know, I didn't have it when I was young. I'm sure you probably didn't either. And for a lot of the budding athletes, the quicker you can kind of get that, you can grasp that and get that concept in your mind, the faster you're going to really start compounding the benefits and then really being the best athlete you can. So
when you're teaching a room, that's the question. Because you've taught big seminars, big classes, super noticeable for you when someone's lacking or when someone's got fantastic ability to move or perform whatever the focus is for the day. Hard to sort of create a session that caters to all levels of ability. Something that you've got experience with around your training and when you're coaching, and sort of like where you would go for, like, you know, people that don't move as well as everyone else that's doing the session. What advice do you?
Well, here's the thing. This is what I'm wanting to create with the Optimal Health Model, which is it's a health education company that I've been designing and building over the last 3-4 years. But that's exactly the focus. It's like not everyone is going to benefit from the same exercise or same focus. And it's very important to have the system already preset so that someone can come in their own time, not necessarily need to go to the coach or the expert straight away, but have something to follow. These standards, as you referred to before, where you can start working towards these things in your own time, and then you've got the coach there to start elevating your performance to that next level. But like first, building the foundation is so important. Yeah,
and having that online platform, no one and come access to this tool, this resource, and then recognize I need this to achieve this. My best mate, my partner, whatever, she's really good at this, he's really good at this. They don't need much time here.
Yeah, I think for the physical dimension, I break it into 3 main components in which you want to develop, and it's cardiovascular fitness, muscular and connective tissue strength, and then you've also got the recovery mobility based protocols. So 3 different, you've got cardio, you've got strength, you've got mobility. You could also wrap in recovery into that mobility. You could wrap in muscular endurance into the resistance training and the strength. You're also going to wrap in power training, and then cardiovascular is another whole division of it on its own. But if you can build all of those 3 to a pretty high level, it's going to optimize the physical dimension.
Entirely. We'll be unpacking them. Probably actually is a good place to end it for the next.
Yeah. And
we start unpacking.
Yeah, exactly. The package, having the system set so people have the templates like, now it's easier to understand in my mind the direction I'm going. I need to tick off these 3 dimensions. You go into each and it's got a pecking order of what you're needing to focus on based on your goals. Yeah. So that's, man, like, we're going to get deeper and deeper into it with each successive episode. I think it's important just to let the crew and the audience that are listening know that what to expect from each episode, because it's going to be relatively casual and informative discussion, but it's also going to be mixed with expert level guidance and knowledge. Not only from us in our own fields, but we're going to be getting some pretty amazing guests on in the future.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it in particular.
I'm pretty excited to get some Jiu-Jitsu professors, like get Rodrigo on and people like that as well.
Yeah.
As well as, some people in the academic world, and just through our own lives, all the people we've met. It's going to be fun.
Yeah. Also, anyone who is listening to this, we're both available on our platforms. So Instagram. We're pretty good at replying, right? Like sometimes we're doing our own thing,
getting better,
focusing on our own goal.
Yeah,
we're getting better.
You can give what's your plug? Give your Instagram and whatever.
Yes, Stephen Booth, JJ. So Stephen Booth, YouTube. And I'm pretty responsive. If you want to send us some questions that you want us to cover, talk about, feel free to fire them our way.
Yeah, please.
Or any idea? Yeah, we'll address them at the podcast. We'll have a little section at the end, and we can troubleshoot stuff.
Yeah, bro. Yeah, well said. Like, we are inviting everyone that listens to this to send us a direct message. I'm Fraser Beck Breathe on the gram, or Fraser at optimalhealthmodel.com for an email if you want to send through something in that medium. We're going to be covering the topics of physical, mental well-being, as well as personal growth, spiritual practices, and many more. I'm very excited to start the journey, and we've got this goal to get 20 episodes before the end of the year, so everyone listening can now hold us accountable to that.
That's great.
Yeah. For our next few episodes, we haven't fully planned and finalized what we're going to be doing, but as you could probably hear, the topics that we've touched on in relation to sports performance and enhancing that physical dimension of health, we're going to be starting there. Yeah.
We just wanted to get it going and talk about our background. A lot of the time, it's important to know that the people that you're learning from have walked a similar path. It's not woe is me. We've troubleshooted a lot of our obstacles and problems that we had, and I feel like I've got a pretty firm handle on stuff that's for at any level, beginner, advanced athletes, high performance athletes, etc., etc. So important to know that we've done it and put a lot of the work in ourselves.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I guess we're at a point we've walked the walk for long enough where we feel confident to start a podcast. So are people actually going to listen to this? And yes, we both believe, we've discussed, it's time to start a podcast.
Absolutely. Keep going.
Awesome, brother. Well, thank you for the first episode of Optimise. We look forward to
building on it.
Yeah, exactly, and hearing all your questions.
Yeah, thanks to all our listeners. Tune in, like, subscribe, etc., etc.
Yes. Don't forget to like and subscribe.
Yeah, like and subscribe.
All right. See ya.